Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have the pleasure of having Nicola Behrman with me. Nicola is a spiritual sage, cosmic alchemist, and officiant of sacred unions. Welcome, Nicola. So nice to have you here.
So wonderful to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, as I start out with a lot of my interviews, I ask the people, my speakers, to talk a little bit about their story, how they came to do the work they're doing, and what kind of, they see going on in the world with the work that's happening. Where to start, right?
Just that little thing. Just that little thing.
Exactly.
It's so interesting, like stopping and taking a moment to really consider, like, what was my journey to this point? And in many ways, obviously, it feels so vast that I don't even know how to distill it. And so I'm inviting in, like, what's the most important thing that I want to share about how I got to where I am in terms of being an energy alchemist, being a spiritual sage. Like, how did this happen? And I think, honestly, and in terms of what's most useful to people who are listening, is intuition. Intuition. We are taught and we are guided as a society to make choices in our lives and to make decisions. And we're brought up in many ways, most of us, or historically most of us, in a very structured educational system where we keep looking forward to what we want to do in the world, who we want to be, how we want to design our lives, in effect. And at the same time, we are souls, and there is an entire journey that in many ways has nothing to do with the human choices that we might be making. And when we look back at our lives, we often realize that the human choices that we have been making are beautifully, beautifully coalescing into something that is much, much, much deeper. So as I look back at all the different choices that I've made in my life, it blows my mind in a way to see the tapestry and to see the ways in which everything that I did, like every choice that I made, in some way, not only got me to this point, but was really, really important in terms of having a toolkit for who I am today and the work that I do today. And it doesn't necessarily look linear. It wasn't adding one thing and one thing and one thing and knowing that there were 10 things that I needed to do in order to be a cosmic alchemist. But as I look back, being a writer, having a master's in spiritual psychology, making almond milk, being raised Jewish, like understanding the importance of ritual, all these things collectively still make up a really, really huge part of who I am and what I do. But I didn't ever consciously start out this life thinking that I was going to be an alchemist. Like, it just wasn't in my frame of reference. And they talk about the still small voice. And I know from personal experience that when we create this space, and sometimes that space is harrowing. Like, it's not that it's, as you know, as we know, it's not all unicorns and butterflies. Like, the surrender that is asked of us, and that is asked of us by us, in order to really connect to the larger web of what this existence is, can be very painful. And there was a 2-year period in my life where, coming back to intuition, and it's such a typical story, but I just had to step away. Like, I had a thriving business. I was living with my ex, and we'd created this thriving business together that within the first 9 months, we were invited to Oprah. We were called one of Zagat's top companies, food companies in Los Angeles. Like, for most people, it was the dream. It was a dream. And my heart just knew that it wasn't the truth of the fullness of the truth of who I was and what I came here to do. And it's almost as though there's a joy barometer inside us. And even when things look so incredible on paper and are incredible and fulfilling, you can't fake it. And I just knew that doing this for the next 20 years of my life, like however exciting or fun or remunerative it was, it just, there was a niggle, and I didn't know what the niggle was. And how I found it was I just walked. Like I just walked for days and days and days. Like I would have nothing to do in my day, and I would get up and I would just walk. And there was a connection that was created and serendipities that started to happen, and people started coming into my life. And I just knew that I just had to keep following the next step and the next step, even though on paper it probably looked like, I wouldn't say a nervous breakdown, but it looked as though I had given up things that people work so hard for no reason. Like it possibly looked like self-sabotage. And the truth of surrender is it doesn't matter what any of it looks like. You just have to follow the calling that is inside you. And as you do, the miracles, literal miracles that start unfolding lead you to the next one and to the next one and to the next one. And there's such a profound yes that you just know that this is a way of being. And in that process, we discover ourselves.
Whew. Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, I feel this so strongly. I resonate so strongly with what you're talking about, the journey. The little bit you just described there is so full of truth, resonance, understanding, knowing, capital K knowing yes. From here, knowing from down here. Yes. I understand because I've come from a very similar path. Actually, exactly that same thing, that same process, different facade, but same exact point. And what you just described there is so perfectly illustrating the process that all of us will go through and are going through on this journey. And the key component is that surrender. The surrender and the tuning in to the intuition, which is that barometer you mentioned.
Yes.
I'd like to talk a bit more about those 2 points because I think they're so important for people to get to know better and to understand and make friends with, you know, through the whatever challenges might arise.
It's so funny. I remember one of my best friends saying, who's known me most of my life, that one of the things she always found so interesting about me is that I'm uncompromising in being willing to take less, like to take less than what this life offers. And I never considered myself to be someone who's uncompromising, but you just described it so beautifully, like the knowing with the capital K. Many people walk around the earth. It's so funny. I read an article yesterday that was related to the election, and there's a whole political group, and not to make this political, but who are saying that the fact that we didn't get a female president was proof that we can't have nice things. And I read it and I was just like, that's not true. Like, it doesn't even matter the specifics of what they were talking about. Like, we will get a female president whenever we are ready to get a female president. But this notion that we can't have nice things, it's not true. Like, we absolutely can have nice things. Like, this notion of what was perceived as being uncompromising is an inner knowing that we came here as souls to experience deliciousness. Like, we just did. We have many, many different understandings of what existence is, why we are here, what it means to be human. And it's not for me to put my idea onto the whole map and say, this is what it is. But from my knowing, with a capital, medium, and little size K, is that we are souls. We live in many dimensions of reality. This human dimension of reality, this human lifetime, is really an opportunity for a great adventure and a trip to be in third dimension and to get to have the experiences of what it is to be in human form, to eat delicious food, to have beautiful connections, to touch. Like, this is a gift. And I think for many of us, and often for many on the spiritual path, there is a negative perception of what it is to be in the third dimension. Like, there's such a desire to awaken to other levels and to experience the 11th and the 7th and the 12th and all others, that we sometimes spend a lot of our waking days, definitely our sleeping days, but our waking days, trying to check out. And I feel like, and it's hilarious how we've got here so quickly, because this isn't what I started off talking about, but it's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. I had one message for humans who are here right now. It's, we chose. Like, we're not victims. We didn't just come here to heal karma so that we can go back to the lighter, more delicious realms. We came here because it's delicious. So yes, like, let's be uncompromising in the remembrance that if it doesn't feel, and it's not that it has to feel delicious every moment, like we just said, the notion of surrender, the process of surrender, it's intense. Like, I think I used the word harrowing already. And the truth is, for me, there are still moments that it is. And for many others, it is. I like to hold the knowing and the notion that this isn't the process that will be forever and ever and ever. That there are children being born today who are so deeply, profoundly in the remembering that there's no forgetting. And then there's no harrowing process of releasing beliefs, societal expectations, etc. Like, they just are who they are. But for us, at this moment in time on this planet, it's literally like an energetic unpicking that happens for most people between the sleep state and the awakened state. And it's brave and it's really courageous to decide to take that journey. But the beautiful thing is, and it kind of brings us full circle to the beginning into intuition, we kind of have no choice because we already chose. Before we came into this lifetime, we chose. And we can kick and we can scream, maybe stream, but we can scream. But for the most part, until we consciously decide that we're going to really step onto the path, I think for the most part, there will be a level of ourselves that does feel compromised, because we always know, as much as we might not know consciously who we are and why we came here, our soul always knows. And this journey is really a process of just getting back, so interesting, to our soul knowing. And our soul knowing is that this is a very, very bountiful and beautiful and delicious, delicious ride. And if we can trust, and I say that as someone that continues to learn this lesson, I know intuitively, like, you know this too, that the depth of the experiences that we've had, the magic that we've witnessed, it's unfathomable. There are moments of life that are legitimately like a Disney fairy tale. And Disney fairy tales have had such a bad rap for not being so kind to the perception of women. But the truth is that there are elements of Disney fairy tales that are incredibly accurate. I went to see Sleeping Beauty. No, see, I keep calling it Sleeping Beauty. I went to see Beauty and the Beast last week. And I came out and I was just like, that is the closest thing to a reality TV show that I've seen in a long, long time. Like, It's literally some of the things that are portrayed in animation are what we know to be real life. Like the animals really do speak to us. The plants really do speak to us.
Yes.
The journey of embracing and integrating the shadow, like it's so real. It's so real. How funny to go to an animated movie and to feel like it is more like reality than most perceptions of reality.
Wow, so brilliant that you brought that up as an example, because I find that's true in music, in stories, in movies, which are stories.
Yes.
There's a lot of creative ways that are like, let's take Beauty and the Beast. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm certainly going to now, because I understand exactly the elemental things you're talking about, the symbolism in seeing that. And I think that, you know, on some level, the messages, the seeds are planted for everyone there. Whether you consciously recognize it or not, part of us responds to that. And we may not even understand why, or we might be conscious of it just like you were seeing it.
Yeah.
But regardless, that permeates on a level of who we are, and it enlivens something in us. And whether Walt Disney or the producers or Hollywood knows it or not, this is a message coming through this movie.
Yes.
For us to recognize, for us to become more aware of. It's a precursor, if you will.
Yeah, it's a spark. Like it's a spark that wherever we are on our journey can begin the process, can become proof for us of the process. I was mentioning it before, I think, like this notion of technology and Facebook being such an incredible tool in this new time. And it's, again, like all of these things can be used for our benefit or our perceived detriment. Who knows if there ever is actually any kind of detriment, because it's all learning and it's all the process. But the ways in which anything, and particularly technology, can be used to spark remembrance is incredible. I feel like there was a very kind of 1980s, 1990s, 2000s sense of having to get rid of everything that seemed not sacred. So like no alcohol, no like computer technology, like spending hours on Facebook was perceived as something that was only negative and only about disassociating. And the truth is, we can take anything and use it for magic. And when I say magic, like I mean the awakening and the remembrance of what is possible in this lifetime. And the messages that are coming through, it's not that they're coming from Facebook, obviously, they're coming from the wider cosmos. Like we literally, and this is what I teach in my work, we have teams. Like we have light teams, we have cosmic teams, every single one of us. And they commune with us, and we, in other dimensions of reality, commune with us, and we set things up, and it comes through the mechanisms of the day. So much like in Atlantis, when technology was a very, very big part of how we communed and how we did life, we are seeing these mechanisms, Disney movies, Facebook posts, as a way to spark our remembrance.
Yes, and the point about technology and Facebook in particularly here, it mirrors the field. I mean, this is how we telepathically, intuitively are connected anyway, and becoming much more so as part of the awakening.
Yes.
And here we have this common, quote unquote, mundane tool, which is Facebook, but looking at it a little bit deeper, you see the parallels and the connections of how this is, it's a reflection. It's, in a way, I feel like it's getting us used to more of what's already there in our understanding and our connection. and when we start interfacing with our devices more, there's just a lot that I see that it's kind of in this threshold period between where we've been and where we're going. There's a lot of change happening. Technology is moving so quickly, and so are we awakening so quickly. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think, it's a reflection between the two things.
Yes. And it's very interesting because we have choices at every turn. And it's so interesting hearing me kind of waxing lyrical about Facebook, because when I think about like alternate realities and the computer games and putting on screens to go into them, and the notion of having chips put in our brain, that's not my choice for my future. Like, it's just, intuitively, it doesn't feel like what I want to be connected to. But for some, perhaps it will be the thing that will springboard them into an awakening of knowing that when you walk through the world and when you see the trees and the plants and the animals, that you can actually have that experience without drugs, without alcohol, and without a computer screen attached to your eyeballs. Like, it's literally here right now. And we will receive it and connect to it when we receive it and connect to it.
Exactly. So yes, that's the thing. It's well, as we become more fine-tuned in our perception of energies and frequencies and the other dimensions, and it's a gradual thing, of course. It's or maybe not, but in my experience, I've gradually, well, it's been kind of, it depends on what's going on the spiritual journey. I've had situations where I had an awakening point, and then afterwards it was like a rawness, a beautiful rawness to the world. The colors are brighter, the sensitivity is greater, the awareness, it's just like, a big something got peeled away, and here I was with my heart. And even as I say that, it's like, whoosh, I feel it. Yes.
I can feel it in my feet. Do you remember there was a time when we were communing on Facebook, and there was an incredible guy from Santa Barbara, I can't remember his name. Was it Nathaniel?
Yes, Nathaniel, yes.
I can feel it right now. Every time I saw you or him commenting on this post, it was one evening specifically, and I feel it right this second. My feet get activated in a way that it's difficult even to express, but it is just the most incredible, delicious, energetic sensation. It's energy just rolling through my feet. And I've had the experience of this before and of the sensation, but I've never had it in that way, when I would see a comment that you made and suddenly my feet would ping, and then I'd go and do something else, and then one of you would write a comment and my feet would ping. It was, and I can feel it right now. It's literally, it's like an orgasmic sensation just floating through our being.
I remember now exactly what you're talking about. I remember that posting session or whatever, and I remember your comment about your feet. Yes.
And I can feel it right this second. This human existence is such a trip. It's a trip.
It's a total trip. And as you're talking about it, I've got chills too. So I'm also tuned into what's happening with you right now. How do we explain this? And in a lot of ways, I think maybe we don't need to explain it. It's something that we know when we know, and that's perfect. But I think it's an interesting conversation piece too, because we're talking about a Facebook post probably, 6 months ago or something like that. Yeah. And it happened then. And yet here we are connecting. It's happening as well now. What does this say about time, space, and all of that? I mean, that's a whole subject. We could go down that pathway in terms of relativity and time and space and quantum physics and the lack there of linear time. I mean, there's just so much, and it's so beautiful. And this is the magic that we're talking about.
It's so the magic, because as you say these things, I'm I am not educated in a way that I can possibly like go down the rabbit hole of being able to explain what is happening. Like that was my first reaction. But the truth is, we don't have to be physicists or scientists in order to know and experience. And also, and this is what's happening more and more, in order for divine information to come through us. Like, we don't even need to know that we know something for it to legitimately come out of our mouths. And the funny thing is, this is such an interesting segue. We are historically set up in a society where intellect is so important, our brains are so important, and the notion that information could literally just come through, we don't know how to trust it. Like, we feel as a society that we need to have 20 years of experience in the lab in order to be able to talk legitimately about time and space. And the truth is, and this is what we are moving into so much more, there are so, and this is my deep knowing, there are so many different dimensions of reality. There are so many different notions of truth that there absolutely is more than one answer, even to the scientific questions. And what does that mean? Like, why does that scare us so much? Because we don't truly, as a people, understand what we're doing here. We don't understand why we were born, why we die, why we maybe come back again. Like, it is almost beyond our brain's ability to comprehend what existence is. So to try and ground ourselves and root ourselves, we try to look to people for answers. And we try to say that there is one answer to every question. And that if we go through this process of learning, that we will get to the place where we can be the disseminator of that information. It's why we trust doctors so much with our lives. It's why we would much rather believe that all doctors know everything than open our consciousness to the fact that they might be human too and they might not know. Because that invites us, in a good way, to have to trust a deeper knowing and a deeper intuition. And we are, I keep saying historically, because I know that it's shifting so much, and it's not true for everyone, but for the majority of the historic human experience, we are so scared of the potential chaos of having to trust our intuition, of not being greeted with very tangible, specific answers, that we're too scared to enter that territory. And this is such a beautiful, beautiful connection to what we were first talking about. Letting go, surrendering, allowing the spaciousness for the answers and the truth and the guidance to come through. We have, as a society, in many ways held a belief that if we can't see it, it's not real and it's not true and it can't support us and guide us. And so we try and hold on to these tangible structures, religion, doctors, priests, lawyers, mathematicians, scientists, all of whom are beautiful in their own right and in the exploration and the discovery of what it is to be human, but not to be held up as deities who have all the answers for us, because there is a connection in our own heart and a compass in our own heart that is really, really fundamental to the kind of life and existence that we get to live in this lifetime. And it's brave. It's really brave to allow it to be true and to start the process of exploring and connecting, because it's so vast that it really is like learning a million new languages in the dark.
Yes.
And the lights literally, as a cat just jumps over the neighbor's yard.
Perfect.
literally in that vastness of the darkness of the night sky, when we close our eyes even, and this is something I experienced personally the stars literally show up. Like, I work cosmically with the stars, and specifically with a constellation, the Pleiades.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my reconnecting was literally that when I close my eyes and when I lead people on guided journeys, when I sing and when I drum, there are literal, tangible lights that show up when my eyes are closed.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they are the stars. And it gives me a grounding that allows me to go deeper and deeper into territory that is so profoundly guided by intuition that trust is literally our most important tool.
That was so beautifully described.
Oh, thank you.
So beautifully described. And I know those stars you're talking about.
Mm.
I do. And the point you mentioned a moment ago about our fear to circumvent the linear mind, the ego, the personality self, into more of who we are, that's the rub, that's the threshold, that's the every step of the way, every phoenix disintegration and reorganization point, all of these processes, that I believe constantly over and over to one degree or another is what we're dealing with. The courage, by the way, I love the word courage from the French word heart, coeur. I think my French is not very good, but coeur is it's about having the heart, the courage to move through these challenges, these places, these unknown lands, and trust what is invisible. Trust what is speaking to us from deep within. Trust what's beyond the mind. Just like your journey when you, in the beginning of this interview, when you gave up your business that looked perfect on paper, you know, but you were trusting, and you've come into something way more powerful in alignment with you as a result of that. And it's just that over and over, where it's trusting, surrender, trusting over and over again. And as we go through these processes, getting to the point where this other part of us has more of a presence. We feel more sovereignty within ourselves. And then we begin to find that harmony and balance, because we are in this physical body and we are so much more. But while we're in this physical, you know, it's coming together and doing that dance. Nicola? Hello? Oh, I'm not sure if I lost you or not. Let me see. Hold on, everyone. I'm not sure. Nicola dropped off, and I'm not sure if she's still there or coming back. So give me just a moment here. Let's see what happened. It says it's still recording, so let's see what happens. Nicola, I'm not sure if you can hear me. It says it's still recording, but I don't see your picture here anymore, and I don't hear you. Let's see. Just give it a moment or two, guys. See if she comes back. I've had a little bit of problem with my internet connection, depending on where I'm interviewing people. Sometimes from Bali or Australia, the connection is not so good. Today it's just California, but I'm not sure what's going on. So let's see. I'm hoping that she pops back up. Oh, wait, here she comes, I think. Nicola, hi.
That was hilarious timing. My internet just went out.
Well, I saw that, but I kept talking to everybody because I saw that from my side it's recording. So hopefully it was still recording, and then now you're back. So
can you edit that out?
Well,
or if not, you are still talking. Yeah, I went to another dimension. Clearly,
something's going on here with the energy. I kept talking.
It's so funny because you were just talking about that, and you'll tell me like where you went after that, but you were talking specifically about sovereignty, and the sovereignty of, this is so funny. It's like the metaphors are just everywhere. Like, they really are just everywhere. Because what I was about to say was, it's as though we do go out. Like, we go out, and in the work that I do with the stars, like, I take people out energetically through guided meditation, shamanic journeys, but to a different dimension of reality. But it's as though we step out of just this one linear knowing of what it is to be human in order to come back in so much more wholly and so much more deeply and so much more sovereign than we ever were before. Like, it's what I was saying before about how we came here to really be in this third dimensional reality in this body, that we go out momentarily, we get taken out, we go on a journey, people get sick, people have a car crash, they lose their jobs. Like, we have heard this so many times. They go through a massive breakup, like their lives just erupt and they break open. And they step out momentarily, or maybe not momentarily, of what their life was. And they explore an expansiveness and they create a spaciousness in this reality that allows them to anchor, and I feel the calling to say allows us to anchor back with full sovereignty. And then we get, and can you feel it in your feet? I mean, I can feel it in my feet very profoundly. We get the opportunity to walk this planet as the truth of who we are. And there is, again, historically, a perception of hierarchy, that there can only be a certain number of kings and queens, and there can only be a certain number of gods and goddesses. Because what made us gods and goddesses or kings and queens was the notion that there were millions of people who were not that. And what we are showing ourselves as souls so profoundly is that there is no shame in owning the truth of our own sovereignty, because it has nothing to do with anyone else walking this planet and whether they have owned theirs or not. But the truth is, every single person on this planet has the capacity to not only go through this process, but to walk. It's intense, the energy right this second, but to walk in the truth of being sovereign. And it disrupts every notion of what society is about. But it is 100,000% truth. We all have the capacity to walk these lands in this way. And while our own journey is our own journey, and it can be the fullest, most delicious journey of our lives, and we get to experience the way in which this really is the Garden of Eden, and this really is a playground of deliciousness, the more and more people that can own it in themselves, the more delicious the frequency of this planet gets.
Yes, and I feel it very strongly right now. I've been feeling it the whole interview, but this is one of those points. I just felt chills go all through my body, and the recognition of that truth. And the words divine spark were coming to my mind when you were describing that, because it is that divine spark within each of us, that fragment of the divine that lives within us, that is us, the gods and goddesses that we are. And it's coming back home to that, really.
Yes. And the reason that even just came through was because I found myself hesitating to say that as we anchor back in, and this is what embodiment is, right? It's like this is the process of embodiment, of releasing the parts of ourselves or allowing the aspects to just transmute, that have forgotten the truth of all our divine sparks. And there was a part of me, the human part, that found myself not wanting to use the term gods and goddesses, as though it was too highfalutin to talk about all of us as gods and goddesses, and feeling like it just puts it into a category of speech that sometimes turns people off. That when they hear us talking about gods and goddesses and how we're all queens and we're all kings, but the truth is, we are.
We are.
We just are.
Yes, we are. We are. And you can put different labels on that or different ways of explaining it, but that's what we're talking about, is that. And think about this too. We were talking about Beauty and the Beast. Think about all the fables and the stories for centuries with kings and queens, princes and princesses, how the princes and princesses get to be kings and queens. I mean, there's so much there, as we were talking about earlier. Go check out the fairy tales again and see these parallels. It's a reflection of our physical life here and what's happening. And I think that's again the magic and the joy. And think about too, as children, we read these stories and we have these fond memories and these read it again, mama, or whatever. It's like, read that book again, because there's something about that resonates so strongly. And most people listening can probably remember a time with some fable, some story that makes them smile or brings them good memories of that. So I just wonder, well, I don't wonder, it's a figure of speech, but why that resonates the way it does, because there's so much truth in it and it's speaking to us.
Yes. It is ironic that fantasy is actually in many ways more real than reality. And like all the great scientists know it, imagination is truly one of the most important things that we can have in our toolkit in order to make important discoveries. Like, imagination is crucial, and imagination is what allows us to go on these different journeys, because the truth is, like, when we go to sleep at night, and they're laughing because it's not even when we go to sleep at night, like right now.
Yes.
Like, we are going on many other energetic journeys. Like, you and I are here communing through this computer screen, but this isn't the totality of our experience. Like, we could be lying on the couch for the next 40 years. I don't particularly want to personally, but we can. And the things that we will still be experiencing in other dimensions of reality are very, very real and very tangible. We have still, even us in our grand awakenings, have the tiniest understanding of what it is to be human and what it is to be a soul. We have no idea.
I know. I've said to myself many times, or to others, I know enough just to know how much I don't know. Once you get that taste and you start understanding at this deeper visceral or knowing level, you see that the expansion is infinite. The possibilities are infinite. And it's hard to put words to that knowing, except that you get it on a level. And I think it's also, in retrospect, if you know a little bit and then you're thinking back to, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever, when you didn't know this, then you have a reference to say, so that's what it was like to be unconscious of these things, or asleep, or however you want to say it, or blocked.
Yeah.
And just by that alone, that gives our mind something to work with in terms of, this is the procession, or this is the experience that we're going through.
And having compassion, like really having compassion for ourselves. I think one of the loveliest things is, as we take more and more steps, whether we call this an ascension process, an awakening, like whatever it is that we use to define it, it's almost as though the tools at the beginning of the journey, like the surrender and the trust and the gentleness. I feel like gentleness with ourselves is one of the most important tools for this period. And those tools never go away, but they never become redundant. We don't, if we imagine that it's going like this in terms of the expansion and getting larger and vaster, what we know is that at every step of the way, trust and surrender and gentleness are really going to be our guiding lights. Because we can look back and we can see that we didn't know, and we tuned in more and we trusted more, and we got to witness the unfolding. And it almost takes the pressure off the next level and the next step, because even though we don't know what is to come, and even though we don't necessarily know what the next dimensional experience is, we know that we have been able to live, and not just live, but step into the realms of thriving in the unknowing. And it's almost as though it doesn't even really matter what the different dimensions are and the different levels of the awakening process. It's really all just an experience of, can I be at ease? Can I be gentle with myself? Can I tune into the vibration of deliciousness, even within the context of not knowing? And I feel like it's so interesting, like just energetically, visually, to see like the representation of what this massive expansion is, and to realize that actually that there's a possibility even that this whole, I've never thought about this before, but that this whole awakening ascension process is actually about getting us continually to just be more gentle and trusting and surrendered with ourselves right here in this body, in this humanness, in this lifetime right now.
Yes. Wow, a couple of things there. First of all, quickly, when you did this,
yes,
do you know what I thought of?
I don't know, but it felt so like I wasn't doing it. That's what I know. Like it was being done.
What occurred to me was chalice, uterus, container.
Wow. That is so crazy, because when you said the divine spark, I make elixirs. I make 7 elixirs for each star. And the one that I just wrote about this week, like to my newsletter that went out at 11 o'clock, was about this being the time, this week, the energetic report was that freedom, like freedom is the vibration. And I spoke about the fact that the elixir that is the elixir of new beginnings, that is the divine spark, like literally using those words, is the one that I am using right now. And I was in Jamaica like 3 days ago, and we were on the beach, and I was with my mum, and we were looking up at the sky, and the clouds, we know, are just such an incredible form of communication. And my mum looked up at the cloud and she said, "Do you see it?" And she's a doctor. It's not that she's like, I mean, she's woo-woo, but it's not her. It's not her everyday life. And she looked up at the cloud and she said, "Do you see it? There's a uterus, like right there." And I looked up, and there was a uterus. Like, we are so in the time and the space of creation and of birthing.
Oh, yes. And those more is just coming in with this. It's when you talked about those qualities of surrender, trust, gentleness, love, those are all feminine qualities.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, again, I just want to say, it's not that men aren't that. Men have the feminine as well. I'm talking about the energies and the qualities of the feminine that are so prevalent and coming in so strongly. I mean, just as you gave a great example with that.
Yeah.
And to be that way with ourselves is how we can most lovingly allow ourselves to expand and unfold on this path. We can fight it, but that's exactly what we are not. It's what we are moving away from is that self-judgment, that criticism, that harshness, that only the linear mind, these kinds of things. It's that feminine that's allowing, that's supporting this whole process.
Yeah. And I want to say, I just looked up at the clock and it's 1:11 in California. I want to say something about that because it's so on my mind right now. This notion of the feminine qualities, which I loved what you said about how they live in all of us. Like, this isn't about being male, this isn't about being female. But I feel like we have a job as people who are in this realm right now to realize that there's an entire conversation that's going on around the divine feminine that, even though it's not intentional, is bashing the divine masculine. And it's not necessarily bashing the divine masculine, but it's bashing patriarchy. And there is, like, it's becoming very mainstream now to kind of say, like, fuck the patriarchy, and, like, let's all get on the ride of the divine feminine. And the truth is, and this is what's so ironic, when my mum and I were looking up at the clouds, I have pictures of this. The uterus shifted in the cloud formation, and it turned into a penis. Like, it absolutely did. We have it, like, on video of us laughing at the poetry and the beauty. And when you were talking about the chalice and the shape, what I feel and understood and understand is the chalice is the container for all those beautiful feminine qualities that you described. But the chalice is the masculine. And without the grounded, rooted, like, we've almost made linear kind of an old word as well, but without the structure of this chalice, all those beautiful feminine qualities that live in all of us would just be amorphously, like, bobbing around without a sense of rootedness and container and containment. And it feels like, and it's so funny, we're coming up to, like, May 1st, and there's so much in the ethers right now about sacred union and about sacred union within ourselves, which is really the way in which we get to truly enter sacred union. That understanding the absolute importance of this marriage, and that the masculine container is so, so, so essential for the feminine qualities to feel safe and to be able to express themselves and to know. And I feel like we're in, like, ceremony and ritual right now. And it's so funny to be a sacred union officiant. It's like, it's really full circle in the themes and the realms.
And it is true. Thank you so much for discerning that and bringing that to a point, because it is that divine dance and that supportive nature of both the masculine and feminine, because we have to have both. And it's that blend and that magic. And yes, the masculine is the structure, whatever it is. If it's a dancing pole or a chalice, it's what gives stability and anchoredness, so that the feminine can just fly and be wild and express herself. And so it's absolutely imperative that we have both things.
And it's so interesting because historically, the feminine, the kind of the spiritual, the woo-woo, like, it has been ungrounded in many ways. Like, it's beautiful. It allows us to access so many other dimensions of reality. But it's like we've had this fight between, like, the linear parts of society that want to hold on to intellect and scientific discoveries for dear life, and then the kind of floaty woo-woo, I want to explore. But it's almost as though within both those archetypes, something's missing, like an element of the other. It's not that these linear intellectuals are so bad and that we only want to be in the expansiveness. If we're in fully the expansiveness without tapping into this, we're probably very, very far up there in a way that is not actually super supportive of the 3D experience. And so we're finding that we go away, we explore, and this has definitely been my experience. Like, I spoke, like, I just walked and I walked and I walked. But now I'm grounding, and I'm more grounded, and I have an offering, and I'm more anchored. And my work in the world, and I say this because one of the things about us being on the leading edge of whatever this expansion is owning the fact that we're still human and we're doing our work. It's not that we have the answers. But for me, anchoring and the qualities of the masculine have been so crucial. And like the last 6 months particularly, and the next 6 months particularly, they are what allows the deliciousness to truly be experienced. And in this notion of the oneness, and not just jumping into a new way of being that bashes an old way of being, we actually get to bring in the attributes of all the different ways of being that in balance together really allow us to anchor in the deliciousness.
That was beautifully said. Absolutely. We need this platform, so to speak, of the masculine.
Yeah.
The vehicle, the to bring out the offering in the world. You know, as we are embodying, encompassing, experiencing more of the feminine, let's say, at our awakening, using just some broad terms here, but all of that, then, so we have it, now what do we do with it? Notice the word do, right?
Yes,
we get this by being with ourselves, and then we do with it, we bring it out. There's a way, a methodology, some stage, a platform like this video, you know.
I was thinking just that, like
this
platform. It's the same thing, it's the container.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow, Nicola. Wow, we could definitely keep on talking about this. I don't.
We're at the tip. We are so at the tip of the iceberg. I
know. Well, maybe we'll continue the conversation at another time in another place.
Love that.
That feels really good. I know we have to wrap it up. I know you've got a free gift. Would you like to just mention that for the listeners really quickly?
And it's so amazing. Like, of course, like it's just so perfectly aligned. It's a guided shamanic journey and a ritual for grounding and for release. So the guided shamanic journey is an audio. It's a 15-minute audio. And then the ritual is an ebook. And it's a beautiful, very simple shamanic ritual for release, which is in many ways how we create space for the magic to come in. We ground, we release, we create the container for all the deliciousness.
Oh, that sounds lovely. And you mentioned shamanic. Oh, that's something else we didn't even touch on, but boy, that could be another conversation. Yeah. Well, that sounds lovely. Thank you for the offering there. It sounds perfect to follow up this conversation on, really, because it's a container and it's a way to explore what we've been talking about.
And it's a lovely way for it to be experiential, like to actually experience the energy of what it is that we're speaking of and to literally feel it in our feet.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Nicola. This has been an amazing conversation, an amazing connection.
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful for you, what you're doing, this connection, and for everyone listening and who is connected to us with this video and all that we're talking about. It's really a joy for me. Okay. I don't want you to be late. I hate to get off, everyone, but I don't want you to be late.
We are good. I bless you. I thank you. This was so delicious. I mean, literally like 1 second of a taste of the infinite of like what this is and what this exploration and what this connection is. But what a gift.
I know, truly a gift. This is the magic. Okay. Well, on that note, everybody, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again for another interview. And thank you, Nicola. It's been a pleasure. You're welcome. Bye, everybody. Mwah.